I want to open the floor to give people a chance for their questions or comments.
Thanks very much, Chris. That was really interesting. Just a question on the staff skills and expertise. Apart from library and information studies, what kind of fields are staff at MIT coming from?
What a great question. That is such a great question. We are still hiring. I think most of our librarians, do still have a library degree of some kind. I myself don't. And so we don't, because of that, we don't require that in all of our librarians. But and it's a great question. And frankly, I mean, look, let's be honest. We can't pay an MIT graduate enough to make a career in libraries more attractive than a career with Google or Netflix or Uber or wherever else they can get a job leveraging their computer science skills. So we haven't had a lot of success in hiring for those skills. What instead we've done is tried to do some training. And we had for our liaison librarians, we just completed pre-COVID, just completed what we called a summer of data, where they spent the summer really learning about research data and data management. And we had put this off, but coming soon. What I want to do is bring in speakers to the library staff from my own campus, the scholars who are actually doing computational research on our collections, to talk about it so that people can start to understand uses of the collection that we don't see, right? Because when somebody accesses our collections through an algorithm or a piece of code they've written, we don't see that interaction the way that we do in the library when they come and say, can you help me with this research project? And so we understand those research projects, but we don't understand the ones we don't see. So I want to bring those in. That wasn't a great answer to your question, because there isn't a great answer to that question.
Brilliant. Question at the back.
Is this one mine?
Yes.
I left mine up there.
Thanks, Chris. So you mentioned the elsevier contract, or the absence of. Can you talk to us a little bit about what life is like post-Elsevier for you, your teams, and your researchers at MIT?
Sure, that's actually an easier question, believe it or not. A couple of things. One, we did an enormous amount of preparation before our Elsevier negotiations and conversations across campus about what was at stake in our Elsevier negotiations, and prepared folks for the fact that we were going to hold to these principles in the MIT framework. And we weren't sure that, we made it about all of our publishers, but we were very clear and people understood that we weren't sure. There were a handful of large commercial publishers who we weren't sure were going to play ball, if you will. So people were prepared for us to possibly cancel and walk away from those negotiations. So it wasn't a huge surprise when we did, and we had support. In the early days, it wasn't a huge impact because we had already canceled the big deal more than a decade ago. So it wasn't, I was going to say it wasn't a big deal, but, and we also, in every contract before that with Elsevier, we had negotiated for perpetual rights. So we were only losing, and this I had to really emphasize this to faculty, all they were losing was instantaneous access to brand new Elsevier content, right? And we're in lots of, reciprocal borrowing arrangements, including the Ivy Plus, and we have Harvard down the road, literally. And so they were going to be able to get what they needed. They just wouldn't get it instantly. So that worked for a little while. Then, of course, as months go on, more new stuff is published and lack of access becomes more acute. It was especially felt hard for our life science faculty, and especially in the moment when they're really trying to do groundbreaking research on pandemics, for example. And so what we ended up doing, and for them, 24-hour access was too long. And so what we ended up doing is we crunched all the numbers, did all the analysis, and it was actually cheaper. It would still remained a lot cheaper for us to go ahead and we contracted with Rapid Reprints just for the Elsevier journals that we had canceled. And so, and the turnaround time for most sort of regular routine requests is almost instantaneous. And that actually, I mean, politically, that worked in our, having them suffer for a little bit of 24-hour and then making it nearly instantaneous felt so good that since we did Rapid Reprints, I haven't heard no complaints since then. Oh, that light's really bright over there.
Thank you very much. Helen Shenson from Trinity College Dublin. I used to work in the, excuse me, your neighbour at the other end of Massachusetts Avenue, and was always very, very impressed with MIT as being fleet and spot on, and absolutely, congratulations, this is fabulous. In terms of what resonates, particularly coming out of COVID, my observation is that there is absolutely an acceleration towards digital online and everything, and at the same time, an acceleration towards the importance of the physical, the visceral, the experiential, and how that translates is into our physical collections as being distinctive. And then library as community space, apart from what we found was apart from the library being the sanctuary, the safe oasis, away from problems and so on, with good internet access and the calm space. I would extend that to it actually being, we found it became a non-medical support. The mental well-being of our students was very, very taxed, and counselling services were recommending students to go into the library for the interaction with people, if nothing else.
Interesting.
Thanks.
Thank you for that. That's really interesting.
Alan Carberry here from University College Cork. Thank you for sharing your vision. Thank you for sharing your experience in MIT libraries. One thing that resonated with me is your unapologetic approach to digital first, and I think that we need to do that more here in Ireland. But I'm also struck by, certainly on our campus in Cork, that the pendulum is almost swinging right back to the opposite, and we're regressing in the university in some ways in terms of progress around digital education, digital access. And I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts on that? Are you seeing that on your campus? And yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I have heard quite a bit about that, the pendulum sort of swinging back, more around people wanting to be with other people. So that part of the sort of physical space and as the previous speaker, for well-being and community building. I'm seeing less of it for access to the physical collections at MIT, but I would see less of it at MIT. I mean, again, we do have, and I feel like I always have to say this, we do have very strong humanities and social sciences, but they're much smaller, no graduate programs in many of the humanities fields at MIT. So, there are a handful of faculty who desperately wanted to get back into their books. And I hope you don't mind me using the air. I don't know if you all have faculty who consider the library their library, but but it hasn't, it's been small. And in fact, and again, but frankly, we're all biased people. I'm probably seeing what I want to see. I'm also seeing many faculty who used to rely on, used to be that kind of, I need my books, who've actually shifted their perspective a little bit and really embraced both online teaching and learning and the affordances of that, as well as digital content. But I think that is a space where MIT may be a bit of an outlier.
Hi Chris, thanks. My name is Jesse, I'm from UL. I'm just wondering, is MIT active in orientation activities for new students and getting them accustomed to life at university, and if so, what shape do those activities take?
We are, but frankly, there's a contrast boy, and looking over there, there's these two bright lights, so I'm sorry if I'm not looking straight at you while I answer your question. But there's a contrast between MIT and Stanford. At Stanford, the libraries were much more heavily involved in orientation activities and were sort of part of the orientation tours and the new student days, it's less of a focus at MIT. The libraries are sort of less, as a physical place, are much less central to the life of students. That is until we reopened this fall, where we actually were able to time. I almost feel guilty saying this. We got lucky. We had started a renovation on our main library in December of 2019, and we were able to actually complete that renovation through the pandemic, and then reopen. When we reopened the library, reopened with a completely renovated new library. And so we're not as much of a part of the central all MIT kind of orientation that students do. They do a lot more work. It's a lot more focused on getting the students into research labs and wet labs and so forth, and maker spaces than into the libraries. But because we were reopening a renovated library, we held our own orientation events and had giveaway. The first week we were open, we had a different tchotchke to give away, high-end tchotchkes to give away and drawings and balloons and all of that good stuff, and had a big crowd. But we're not as integrated into the orientation of new students as I'd like us to be. And so that may be next on the agenda.
Thank you. Hi, Chris. You mentioned that you are interested in diversity and inclusion in MIT, and I just wanted to find out what are some of the practical things you've done to make sure that happens.
Such a great question. Thank you. So we're doing quite a lot around collection descriptions and sort of reframing how collections are described to get rid of offensive language and so forth. We're doing a lot of outreach and events and programming. But I have to say the most practical thing that we've done that I'm most proud of is over the last 2 years, we put a priority on diversifying our management layer in the libraries. I'm sure it's similar here in the U.S. Libraries are more than 80% white as a profession, and and it just gets worse at the management level. So we put a focus on that, and I'm happy to say that over the last 2 years, the new managers and leaders that we've hired, 42% are BIPOC. And that's, to me, an incredible figure that's really changing the sort of feel in our library, the nature of our library. And I firmly believe that as long as we also now do our work to make sure that we are creating a space where those managers can thrive, then I believe that that's going to have a carryover effect in recruiting people of color into all positions across the libraries. So that's one practical thing that I'm quite proud of. And we did that by simply, making it a clearly stated priority, and then every single search really paying close attention, and by activating, our networks. We were able to hire Alexia Hudson-Ward as my Associate Director for Research and Learning, one of the most innovative librarians of color I know in the US, and then her network is amazing. And hiring her and her being able to thrive in our environment sort of establishes us as a place that is welcoming and where people of color can actually find success and feel welcome and belong.
Okay. Thank you. A brilliant question. We're just about to close up, but I have one last question for Chris, if I may. I think the digital first policy, so we have that in UCD as well. I think it is as a central tenet of the general collection development. It is such a powerful, and it's so simple, but it's so powerful and so helpful for all the decisions you make in the running of the library. But how did you manage that or message that, or how does that work with the faculty and, the user community of the library?
No, it's such a great question. And again, I think somebody said something about MIT being sort of nimble and lean or something like that. And I do think we have an advantage to be able to kind of go more boldly and more forcefully there first. Because of the nature of our population and the disciplines that we serve are mostly digital first anyway. But frankly, the best way to sort of that I found to sort of message that so that those who do rely on things that are either only available in print format or more meaningfully available in a tangible format is to be very clear that digital first doesn't mean digital only. And we pairing that with that, it's digital first and an essential core. And so that pairing really helped. And there's still folks who a handful who are not, and not just our patrons, but some library staff who it makes them nervous.
Okay. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah.
So on behalf of everybody, I knew there'd be a load of questions, but that was absolutely fabulous and kind of sums up the energy of the talk and the audience. Thank you so much, Chris.
Totally. Thank you.